Thank you for joining us. The book is called On Character. Tell me about this idea, character. What is that? And how do we get that in public life?
Well, I'm just going to break out of this and start with what I want from you.
From me?
I want
Is it a mug?
All right. To start a national conversation on character.
Yes.
I think we could begin it tonight with this group.
It's a fine group.
I think we...
What's the framing of the conversation?
I think we turn the lights up, we bring some beer in.
Can I ask you a question? What kind of character are we looking for? Well, what is the framing of the national conversation on character in your mind?
Yeah, I think first is character is our choice. That's the great thing about it. We have agency over who we as individuals are. And Heraclitus said an individual's character is their fate.
Character is destiny.
That's true.
Yeah.
I also think it's true of a nation. And so we get to choose what our character is, not somebody else. We get to choose. And it's the essence.
Didn't we just try that?
Yeah. Fair point.
We chose something, some American people went,
And only 65% of America voted.
Yes.
And the reality is we can do better than that.
Right.
What I think we can,
Right.
If character is the essence of who we are, Thomas Paine said that reputation is what men think of us, character is what angels know of us. Then I think if we look inside and we say, what can we, each of us as individuals, be? We have the opportunity to be something different. I mean, none of us is perfect. Every one of us makes a mistake every day. I'm 70 years old. I make mistakes and it still frustrates me.
You're 70? What am I doing wrong? What the hell? What is that? Well, you just choosing good character? Or you just... Meanwhile, I look like I sleep in a meat dehydrator.
The great thing about character is it is a combination of two things. It is our convictions. It's what we believe.
Right.
And there's no right or wrong to that, except we have to have thought about them. We have to know what they are. The beauty of writing this book is it forced me to put on paper and to really think about what I believe. Then the other half of it is our discipline. Do we live to them? You know, you can have a lot of convictions you tell people about, but if you don't live them, they're zero.
Right.
And so I think our character is the essential identity of us as people and as us as a nation. And we've let it erode.
Do you view this... So here's what I see with the audience a little bit now. And I come out usually in the beginning, and I have a little conversation with them, generally beerless, unfortunately.
That's a mistake.
And I'm it really is. It's okay, though, because they'll all get high as soon as they leave the room. I'm noticing a thirst.
Yeah.
Like an anxiety about this idea of control. I think people feel they've lost that agency by living in a country. And look, people win elections, people lose elections. Sometimes you live with a president that doesn't necessarily reflect you. This feels different. So how does this conversation around character, I've always thought action is the antidote to anxiety. What action then within this can bring some relief? There's a thirst out there for conviction, leadership, discipline that they're not getting.
Yeah, I think it's got three steps. I think the first is we need to think about character more. That's largely individual, but you can share it with people. Then we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it in small groups, not just on TV, but we need to talk about it in our schools and our families. We need to have those kinds of...
What are the parameters when you say we need to think about character?
Yeah.
What are the parameters that come to your mind when you think about that? Is it Boy Scout pledge stuff, like be courteous, kind, and forgiving, all that sort of thing, or is it something different?
There are certain norms that I think almost all of us would agree on. But as you talked about faith earlier, there are parts of faith that we vary on. But I think that if we talk about what are the things that sort of bound America together, what are the things that we all believe, how we treat people, be fair to people, have empathy. give an opportunity to people.
So how do you square that? It brings up such an interesting conversation because the worlds that we might inhabit would have a very different view. I might look at the January 6ers and go, that was a lack of character. You know, one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter. How do you square that? And what do you do with people that you think stepped over a red line, but in their mind was almost a heroic action?
Yeah, I think that's right. First, you need to listen to them. One of the things I learned in the counterterrorist fight was we had our forces, which, you know, I was obviously very close to the most elite people. And then we had our enemies, and there was a perception that they were two poles different. They actually had bent up the personal attributes of the best people that I worked with and the best people that we fought. They were courageous, they believed in their cause, they were willing to sacrifice. There was a different life journey that got them to where they were. And if we're willing to listen to another person's life journey and admit often that had we had that same life journey, we would reach those same conclusions, then you reach at a different point. Then they're not suddenly the enemy, they just have a different perspective.
Is the idea, if I had just had Fox News on, I would have been doing that on Nancy Pelosi's desk? Like that just doesn't, there must be some incontrovertible truth, though, is there not? We can't be, is the idea that we are Al-Qaeda is us, that's hard to square.
Well, it is, but if we try to say they're incontrovertible truths, too many of them, what are they? You know, we start to say...
Be courteous, kind, and forgiving. Yeah,
I mean,
no, you're
that's
right.
pretty good. And those are the things that are common denominator sort of things, and that's where we have to connect. Because the reality is we're not going to have the same view from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, different zip codes, different economic backgrounds, because your life journey is just enough different.
Tell me in practice, so you have to negotiate. You're in war. Now, I'll refer to either the counterinsurgency in Iraq or in Afghanistan. You are dealing with, on one level, ideological warriors, maybe in Afghanistan. On another level, mercenary to some extent. You go in there with a bunch of money and go, what are they paying you? I'll pay you this. How did you find common ground with them? Did you have to? Where does the wisdom of this come from for you?
Yeah. I think from experience, one of the things you learn is you have to try to find common ground, and you have to start by having enough empathy. And remember, empathy is not sympathy. Doesn't mean you're rubbing somebody's belly and you agree with them. It means that you can...
Would that have ended the Afghanistan war?
Probably pretty quickly.
Bring in the
You
governor?
have to be able to put yourself on the other side of the table. You know, I would talk to Pashtun elders, and they had big turbans and beards and craggy faces and different lives and minds, spoke a different language, had a different religion. But in reality, they were actually pretty good people. And if you had their loyalty and their respect, they were as good as we are. In fact, they are very similar to us. So if you stop assuming that anyone who doesn't share those attributes is different and therefore less than you have a different approach to it. And you have to be, of course, hard on yourself as well, because...
So is that, you know, the book starts, you did an interview for Rolling Stone during the Obama administration, and where you were critical of maybe some of the tax that we had taken in the war, the way it was being prosecuted, not enough supply, things like that. And you resigned because of that. That's how you open this book.
Right.
Is that where you're reflecting on yourself?
Very much so. Of course, I canceled my Rolling Stone subscription right after that. But the reality,
Don't worry. Everyone else did too. Don't even worry about it.
It's funny now because, you know, we got a little time and space. But no, we had an article that came out that I didn't think was accurate, but I accepted responsibility for it. And the reality was, in that moment, I'd been born in an Army hospital. I'd lived in an Army family. I'd gone to West Point at age 17. I was now 55, almost 56. And suddenly, in an instant, when I offered my resignation to President Obama, I'm not a soldier anymore.
Right.
I'm not a commander. I'm not a soldier. What am I? You could say I'm a failure. I go home.
Is that how you felt?
I felt exactly that way. I felt as though a bolt of lightning I'd always thought I could be fired for incompetence or killed in combat. I never thought I'd be accused of something like that. And so I offer my resignation to President Obama, who was very gracious, but he accepted it. I had flown home all night from Afghanistan for this meeting. I drive across the city to where my wife was living in a set of military quarters, and I tell Annie, it's over. Because she and I had been married for 34 years. And I said, our career's over, I'm out.
Holy.
And she looked at me and she said, good. We've always been happy and will always be happy. And in that moment, what she communicated to me without being straight, she said, kind of face forward. And I always describe Annie as driving or living life like she drives with no use for the rearview mirror. And
Anyway, I don't want to say anything, but she's here. She can hear you right now. I see her right over there.
Gonna be a long night.
Oh, you're not kidding. Who's driving home?
But we've been married 48 years. And if you think about it, you commit to something. And I had committed to the military, I had committed to my marriage, and I'm committed to my country now. And so when I ask you to help lead a national conversation on character, you have the stature, you have the reach.
It's basic cable, sir. It's not. You really should have gone on Colbert. I think that, if you want stature and reach.
No, I mean, as we say, if people are thirsty for something different from what they see, let's encourage them. Not that we're going to provide it from the outside, but we're going to have them provide it to themselves. This needs to start with young people.
So you look at me. Yeah. Okay.
I'm looking over your shoulder now.
But it brings up such an interesting thought, because I'm reflecting on when this happened to you. It was an article where you said some things that might be intemperate for a man in uniform or in command. Right. That's really it. There was no secrets divulged. Right. Now you're watching the Secretary of Defense Snapchatting his wife. Hey, we're bombing at 8. You know, doesn't resign. Is that character? Because it's not. You resigned because your sense of duty and character felt that you would let yourself down and let the country down. But is there character in the reason he's still there is loyalty? And isn't that a character trait that's also valuable? How do you process what's happening now?
Yeah, I certainly think you got to value loyalty. I can't put myself in his position. I can put myself in the position of an American.
Right.
I can put myself in the position of someone who has both launched and been on those missions. And if someone had been using an unsecure mode to communicate about him, I'd have been upset about it.
Yeah.
In fact,
I could see that.
Yeah. I think for the people I worked with, that'd have gotten your ass kicked.
Right.
But the reality is, the thing that upset me most about that was not the mistake. People make mistakes, and we'll make them forever. It was after the fact when people went on public news and they said the information wasn't classified. Of course it was.
Right.
And I don't like the idea that they would look and say something that I know is not true and I think they know is not true. And if
how much of an impediment to a national conversation about character is the reality distortion field about, you know, incontrovertible things that are true or not true? And how do you have a conversation about character in that environment?
Yeah, it makes it particularly hard, because if we start to have a conversation on character now, a certain group is always going to feel defensive because they think that you are leveraging the word character against them.
Right.
In fact, it can go both ways. People on both ends of the spectrum could feel that. but we've still got to have it. And that's why this has got to be a conversation that begins in the center, I think at pretty low levels, that starts with saying, we're not going to vote for you. We're not going to buy your products. We're not going to like you on social media. We're not going to do all of those things you want us to do unless we see some level of character, not perfect character. We're never going to see that.
Right.
But what we're going to see is a set of norms that say, we respect the requirement that there is character. If you make a mistake, admit it. What can our kids learn from watching us if they are absolutely disappointed every time they see, or if they just assume that's the way it is, that'll be even worse.
And I do think there is a certain now mindset that what is rewarded now is result and not process and character. It's, you know, we're in a different situation. But I would even say expand your aperture on this. It's not just about character. I do think there is a certain lacking of national conversations on everything. Yeah. A truth and reconciliation for the American people with each other.
I think it's absolutely right. I think it could start with character, but it really has got to emanate out from there. We have to have a different definition of what we think it means to be an American citizen.
Right.
Because right now, many American citizens think that if you pay your taxes and you vote, and only about 65% of us vote, that you've done your job. Mm-hmm. In fact, the responsibilities are much broader than that. It is to every other American, because a nation is only a covenant between citizens. God did not create the United States.
Shh! What are you saying? What? You're blowing it!
It's an agreement.
Yeah.
And we all
Consent
sign
to the
up
government,
for it.
sure. Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like you have a series of books to write on character and other things, so I flip it back to you. You keep the conversation going about that, General. It's so good to see you.